The wind swept down from the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, dragging dust and old pine, sent across the high plains like a ghost. Elijah Granger stood beside his lean-to stable, one hand resting on the withers of his stallion, Flint, the other holding a rusted pail. Dusk came slow this time of year, creeping like a coyote with secrets. The sky had turned to brass. That's when he heard it, boots over dry earth, fast and ragged. He turned without hurry. A figure stumbled from the tree-lean, breathless, arms scraped from bramble, dress torn at the hem. Her dark hair had fallen loose, eyes wide with panic. Yet she moved with the stubborn grace of someone who'd run farther than she should have and didn't care what it cost. When she saw him, she stopped like she'd hit a wall. Her lips parted, a plea caught behind them. "Please," she said, her voice cracked from thirst. "They're coming." Elijah didn't move. He studied her like one might study weather, quietly, fully. She looked behind her, back the way she came. When she turned to him again, there was no pride left, only raw urgency. I just need to hide. One night. That's all." He nodded once, slow. The door to his cabin creaked as he pushed it open, stepping aside. She hesitated a beat, then darted in. Inside, the air smelled of cedar, ash, and saddle oil. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, tame and low. Tools lined one wall, hooks, horseshoes, a long-handled hammer. Above them hung a saber in a cracked scabbard, next to a sharp's rifle polished to dull silver. Elijah shut the door and bolted it. The woman stood in the center of the room, arms wrapped around herself, taking in the space, with a hunted animal's glance. He poured water from a clay jug into a tin cup and held it out. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice soft now. Her hands trembled as she drank. He returned to the window, drawing the curtain back slightly. The tree-lean yawned in the distance, still and empty. But he knew better than to trust the stillness. She finished the water and lowered the cup. "I shouldn't have dragged you into this." He looked at her then. His face was weathered from sun and silence, beard peppered gray, eyes a deep, watchful brown. "You being followed?" "They will. Soon as they notice I'm gone." She sat down stiffly on a stool near the fire. "Ridgeback gang. 5 of them, maybe 6. Their leader, Jeb Waller. He don't leave loose ends. I stole something. Ledger full of names, bribes, trades. My pa used to be sheriff down in Las Cruces. They hanged him at his own barn last winter." Elijah's jaw didn't move, but his eyes held steady. She mistook his silence for doubt. "I ain't lying. I didn't say you were." She blinked, startled he'd spoken. His voice was quiet, deep, like riverbed gravel. "You gonna give him what they want?" Her lip curled slightly. "I'd rather die." He turned back toward the window. She looked at the saber hanging above the mantel. "You a soldier?" He didn't answer. She nodded to herself. "You don't have to help. Just let me stay till morning. I'll be gone by sunup." Elijah crossed to a cupboard and retrieved a small roll of cloth, bandages, clean and ready. He handed it to her, without a word. She blinked again and took it slowly, as if unsure what kindness meant. Outside, the wind shifted, cooler now, the way it does before night spills in fully. Elijah began moving through the room, wordless but precise, closing the back shutters, adjusting the latch on the cellar, checking the rifle's load. She watched him and saw not panic, but preparation. "You've done this before," she said, not quite a question. He paused, then looked to the fire. "Been some years." They sat in silence for a long while. The flames popped and hissed. A pair of coyotes howled far off, too far to worry. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. "My name's Maria." Elijah gave no name in return. Instead, he opened a narrow drawer beneath the window and pulled out a worn, hand-carved whistle. He stepped outside and blew once, long and low. Flint trotted up from the corral and stood by the porch, ears flicking. Inside again, Elijah lit a single oil lamp, then doused the fire. "Why?" she asked from the dark. Smoke drew his eyes. He sat across from her, the rifle resting against the table. The room now held only shadows and silence. Maria's breathing slowed. "I thought maybe someone helped me in town. But when I got there, the sheriff, the preacher, They were all in that book. Elijah nodded once, just once. A sound snapped in the woods. Not close. Not far. Maria tensed. That could be anything. Could be, Elijah said. He moved toward the window again, gaze sharp. The cabin stood alone at the base of Wolf Ridge. No trails led here by accident. Whoever came after her had to know. Elijah stood there for a long time, until the stars pushed their way through the sky like cold needles. He didn't speak again. Didn't need to. Maria leaned back against the wall, eyes fluttering. Exhaustion winning. For the first time since her flight began, she felt a thread of safety wind its way through her. It was a quiet safety, hard-edged and unspoken. It didn't promise to last, but it felt real. Outside, in the dark beyond the trees, something moved. A branch cracked, deliberate. Then silence again. Elijah's hand found the rifle, slow and certain. Night had come, and with it, whatever hunted her. The night deepened, settling over the land like a closing fist. Inside the cabin, darkness reigned but for the thin glow of a shuttered oil lamp. Maria sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes never straying far from the window. Elijah remained beside the door, rifle balanced across his lap, as motionless as carved stone. Outside, the wind had gone still. That unnatural silence, the kind that comes before a storm or a gunshot, hung heavy. Maria broke it with a whisper. "You hear that?" Elijah nodded. "They're here." A beat of dread passed between them. She gripped the edge of her stool until her knuckles showed white. "I stole the ledger 2 days ago," she said, voice low. "Tucked it under a floorboard at the boarding house in Frisco Creek. Figured I'd ride north and find the Rangers, but I lost my horse to a busted stirrup. Been on foot since." She looked at him, expecting judgment. Instead, Elijah stared into the dark, still listening. "They'll want the book back, but not before they make an example of me." Another nod. "You kill any of them?" "No, but I watched one of them kill a child for asking questions. I've had their faces in my head since." Elijah's grip tightened slightly on the rifle. "What's his name?" "The one who gave the order?" "Jeb Waller." That name pulled something taut in Elijah's expression, a shadow that flickered and then vanished. He stood and moved to the wall, unhooking the saber and setting it beside the rifle. Then he opened the trunk at the foot of the bed, pulling out 2 more cartridges, a coil of rope, and a small leather satchel. Maria watched him with quiet awe. "You fought him before." "I knew him before," he corrected. "Different time." "Who was he to you?" Elijah loaded the cartridges, calm and steady. "Someone I didn't stop when I should have." A sudden clatter snapped their attention to the window. A rock, thrown with intent, bounced off the porch rail. Then another. Elijah peered out through the curtain slit. Shadows moved at the edge of the trees, figures crouching low, keeping distance, waiting. Then came the voice. "Well, hell," someone called, slow and drawling. "You got yourself a quiet friend in there, girl." Maria stiffened. Elijah remained still. "That you, Granger?" The voice continued, louder now. "I thought you died with your fancy blue coat and your misplaced loyalty. Guess you crawled back to this little patch of dirt instead." A shot rang out, sharp, high, and a window pane shattered, spraying glass across the floor. Maria ducked. Elijah didn't flinch. He raised his rifle, leveled it calmly through the slit, and fired. A distant grunt followed. Then silence. "Guess that answers that," he muttered. Maria crouched beside him, breathing hard. "You think they'll rush us?" "No. They'll wait. Watch. Let fear do their work." She looked around the cabin, her hands twitching. "Do you have traps? Anything?" He nodded toward a shelf. "Shotgun under the flour sack. Ammunition box behind the cook stove. Lantern oil if they come close." She scrambled to retrieve the shotgun and the box. Her fingers were shaking, but she handled the weapon like she'd used one before. Elijah raised an eyebrow. "My father didn't raise a fool," she said. "Taught me to ride, shoot, and read contracts. Said survival was just literacy with grit." A flicker of a smile threatened Elijah's face, but never fully formed. He returned to the window. Outside, footsteps shifted through leaves. Branches creaked. They were circling, probing. Maria joined him at the second window, covering the back of the cabin. Her shoulders squared. "They won't stop," she said. "They'll torch this place to the ground if they have to." "I know. You got an escape tunnel or something?" He didn't answer. She turned. "You do." "I do." "Then why are we using it?" He looked at her fully now. "Because they'll find someone else. Another woman. Another town. If we don't stand here." She stared at him, trying to place the sudden depth in his tone. Beneath the layers of silence, there was a man shaped by duty, one who'd carried the burden of failing to stop evil once and refused to do it again. Maria swallowed. "So this is where we make our line." Elijah nodded. "It's where I make mine. Yours is your choice." She lifted the shotgun, holding it firm. "I'm done running." The words settled between them like iron. Outside, torches flared into view. Half a dozen flames, bobbing like vengeful stars. "Not long now," Elijah said, voice even. A pause. Then he turned to her. "If I go down first, don't wait. Use the tunnel. Take Flint." Maria shook her head. "You go down, I go down with a fight." Another smile threatened. This time, it stayed a little longer. The ridgebacks stepped into view beyond the trees, outlined by firelight, faces cruel and grinning. Jeb Waller stood at the center, tall and broad-shouldered, his wide-brimmed hat casting a deeper shadow. "Come on out, Granger," Jeb called. "Let's not dance in the dark all night." Elijah raised the rifle again. Maria chambered the first round into the shotgun. The firelight flickered across the floorboards as Elijah turned down the wick of the lamp. Shadows closed in again, and in the near distance, boots began their steady march toward the door. The torches came down the hill like angry stars, falling from the heavens. 6 men in total, shadows bending around their shapes, rifles in hand, pistols at their hips, laughter like dogs snapping at meat. They spread wide, circling the cabin at Wolf Ridge, knowing this ground like coyotes knew a carcass. Jeb Waller walked with a slow, measured gait, the kind only men certain of their power used. His duster billowed behind him, and the silver badge he'd taken from a real lawman glinted near his chest. Inside, Elijah Granger counted each step. "They'll try to flush us," he murmured, gaze flicking to the back window. Maria crouched beside the cellar hatch, the shotgun across her lap. "I know. That's how they smoked out the trading post in Dixon, torched the chimney, then picked off the folks who ran." Elijah moved to the wall, pulled down a bucket of water, and poured it across the hearth's ashes. The steam rose in a hiss. A voice outside boomed. "Ain't looking to kill you, Maria. Not unless you make us. Come on out now. You and Granger walk, ledger or no ledger." Maria leaned to the window. "He ever tell the truth?" "Only when he's talking to a corpse." Elijah slipped through the curtain crack again. "Left flank, 2 in the brush." Maria nodded. She loaded a second round. Then came the first real move. A flaming bottle arced from the dark and shattered against the porch post. Fire leapt to the wood like it had been waiting. Elijah was already there, smothering it with a horse blanket soaked earlier in silence. Another bottle flew, this time breaking against the wall. Heat licked through the seams. Maria sprang up and fired through the side window. A figure yelped and fell hard. "That's one," she muttered, breath fast and tight. Elijah chambered a round and picked off another through the front glass. Clean, practiced, unshaken. The man crumpled near the woodpile. Outside, the gang yelled and scattered. Waller's voice rang out again. "Well now, that ain't polite, Elijah. We was just starting to visit." Elijah stood calm, rifle lowered. "Last time we visited, it cost me 14 men at Cold Creek. You remember that, Jeb?" A pause. Then a chuckle. "You were always the moral one. How's that working for you?" "I sleep." Waller's voice hardened. "That ledger ain't worth your bones." "I'm not dying for paper," Elijah said. "I'm dying for the chance you don't write anymore." Another pause, longer this time. Maria stepped beside Elijah, sweat on her brow, soot on her cheek. "You really a captain?" "Back in the war." "I was." She nodded slowly. "You don't talk like other men." Other men didn't come back with this silence. Outside, the siege resumed. Another man crept near the back window, blade in hand, thinking quiet made him clever. Maria swung open the shutter and let him see the end of the barrel. He froze. "Run," she said. He did. 2 shots cracked the night, misses, blind. The outlaws had grown twitchy now. The cabin didn't burn. The woman didn't scream. And the man inside didn't fall. Inside, Elijah reloaded. "We'll run out of rounds before they run out of time." Maria glanced toward the cellar. "Then maybe it's time we move." Elijah shook his head. "Not yet. They haven't pushed hard." She stared at him. "You're waiting." "For the one who isn't talking." Maria frowned, then caught it. Movement at the tree lean, subtle and slow, not like the others. A tall man, lean and deliberate, crawling around the back edge. No torch, no sound. She raised the shotgun, but Elijah stopped her with a hand. "Let him come." And he did. The figure slinked around to the cellar entrance, crouched low. Thought he was clever, quiet. Thought Elijah hadn't built the whole damn place with his own hands. The trap snapped. With a sharp metallic whip, a snare line caught the outlaw's ankle and yanked him backward into the wall. He let out a choked yell as he crashed to the ground. Elijah was already outside, crossing the yard like a panther. The man scrambled, reaching for his pistol, but Elijah kicked it away, drove the butt of his rifle into the man's ribs, and dragged him back toward the porch. Maria stood guard at the door, mouth open slightly. Elijah dumped a man at her feet. "Found your whisper." Waller's voice rang out, more urgent now. "You touch him, Granger, and I'll burn your bones into the dirt." Elijah knelt beside the outlaw and spoke low. "That ledger tells me which towns are already bought. But you tell me where you hide between raids." The man spat blood. "You're already dead." Elijah looked to Maria. "Hold him." She did, hand steady on the shotgun. He returned to the window. Waller was stepping forward now, torch raised, pistol drawn. "You think you're some righteous ghost, Eli? This land doesn't care about right. It cares about who's still standing." "Then come test that," Elijah answered. The wind picked up. Waller turned to shout something, then stumbled. His torch hit the dirt. Behind him, Flint had arrived, silent as a memory. The stallion bucked high and hard, hoof striking the nearest man in the jaw with the sick crack. Another outlaw turned to fire, but Maria, from the porch, ended him clean. Waller cursed, backed away, then ran. 2 remained. One broke for the trees, disappearing into dark. The other dropped his gun and raised both hands. Elijah stepped from the cabin slowly, the rifle across his chest. The firelight cast long shadows across his boots. Waller's voice, fading now, echoed into the hills. "You'll regret this, Granger. You'll die for nothing." Elijah stood beneath the stars, silent, unmoving. Maria joined him. "You think he's coming back?" she asked. "Yes," Elijah said. "But next time, it won't be with fire." She looked out over the bodies in the grass, and the one bound on the porch. "What then?" He turned to her. "It'll be with a badge." Morning came slow to Wolf Ridge. The horizon bled red and gold, brushing the trees in copper light, as though the land itself sighed in relief. Smoke curled gently from the cabin chimney now, the only sign that fire had ever threatened. The dead were buried in the soft edge of the canyon. The bound man from the night before had been marched down the trail with a mule rope tied around his waist, heading east, toward justice. Elijah stood on the porch, cradling his coffee like it was the last warmth left in the world. His coat was torn at the sleeve, and a fresh welt bruised his jaw, but his hands didn't shake. Beside him, Maria leaned on the post, face calm, eyes tired. She hadn't spoken much since the siege. Not out of fear. She had none left. But something in her had shifted, something that didn't need words to be felt. Elijah finally broke the silence. "Waller won't stop." "I know. They'll come harder next time, with a star on their chest and a warrant in their hand." She took that in, slow and steady. "You gonna run?" "No." She looked at him. "Then what?" Elijah sipped the coffee, watching the valley. "There's a marshal in Santa Fe. Used to serve under my command. Name's Howard Reeves. Good man. Honest when it still matters. If I bring him this ledger and a witness, maybe we can burn the whole rotten root out." Maria nodded. "You think I'm your witness?" He turned to her. "I think you know where the rot starts." She watched the steam curl from her mug. "I was a girl when Waller first came through our town. My father wouldn't sell his land. A week later, he fell into the well. Broke his neck, they said. Ma followed soon after. I was married off to a banker in Red Gulch before I was 16. Waller made sure I stayed close enough to keep quiet. And now," her jaw set, "now I'm loud." They stood in quiet for a while longer. Down in the field, Flint paced the fence line, restless, proud, still watching for shadows. Maria spoke again. "You never told me what you were before the war." Elijah hesitated. "I was a pastor's son, taught to fix fences and quote the book of Psalms." She raised a brow. "What happened?" "I learned that fences don't hold backfire, and Psalms don't stop bullets." A long wind rolled over the ridge. The smell of ash was faint now, replaced by juniper and dust, and something else, something like resolve. Maria stepped down from the porch and walked to the edge of the yard, where the last of the outlaw torches had burned out. She picked one up, examined the charred wood, and tossed it aside. Then she turned. "If we're going to Santa Fe, we need to leave tonight, before Waller sends men to Red Gulch." Elijah nodded. "We ride light. No trail, no fire, no sleep till sunrise." "And when we get there?" He met her gaze. "Then we light a fire they can't put out." By mid-morning, the cabin was shuttered, the horses saddled. Elijah slid the ledger into his coat, beside the old war medal he hadn't touched in years. Maria packed only what she needed: ammunition, a worn photograph, a letter never sent. They rode in silence for the first mile, the trail winding through the dry scrub and low hills. The land stretched open ahead, vast and waiting. After a while, Maria asked, "You think people believe us?" Elijah glanced at the horizon. "They won't need to. The truth doesn't care if it's believed, it just waits. Long enough, and it walks back out of the dust." That night, in a cantina on the edge of Santa Fe, a deputy stumbled through the door, blood on his shirt, a crumpled badge in his fist. Said a ghost rode in with a woman dressed in firelight. Said they handed over a ledger, so damning the judge wept. Said they named names, and then disappeared into the canyon like smoke. Some say they were bounty hunters. Some say vigilantes. Some say she was a dead man's widow, and he a soldier who never stopped fighting. But the towns Waller once strangled began to breathe again, and in certain valleys, children whisper stories of the quiet horseman who rode with a flame beside him, who fought not for revenge, but for silence to mean something again. And if you head out to Wolf Ridge these days, you'll still find the cabin, half swallowed by vines, a cross hammered into the porch rail, and hoof prints in the dirt, always fresh. Like legends, they never quite fade. They just ride on,